in here. Good morning. It is Friday, April the 2nd, and this is The Drill, the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. April 2nd, Satan is a liar and the father of lies. Don't allow the enemy to strategize against you. Overcome and destroy his strategies through prayer. The main tactic of the enemy is deception. He is a liar and the father of lies. My word will expose his tactics to you. I am light, and my word is light. The light exposes the enemy and tears away the darkness. Beware the hosts of lying and deceiving spirits that work under the authority of Satan. These spirits cause delusion, deception, lying, seducing, blinding, error, and guile. Call upon my name, and I will strip away the power from these deceiving spirits and will cause your eyes to be opened. Pray that your enemies will be scattered, confused, exposed, and destroyed. Prayer declaration. The Lord has rescued me from all my enemies and from the lying and deceiving spirits that belong to the devil. My enemies are destroyed by my God. The Lord will lead me on level ground and will persevere my life. In his righteousness, he has brought me out of trouble. With his unfailing love, he has silenced my enemies and destroyed all my foes. In his power, I will contend with the powers of darkness that are set against the kingdom of God. And that was the daily declaration for spiritual warfare. And today on The Drill, we will be talking about determinism in sports, acting like a parent, make a promise, Governor Gasm, and the cult of paradise. All that when I come back. Thank you, but first, everybody rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. So thinking about determinism and as it relates to our society, and again as it applies to sports, there was a guy yesterday I heard on the radio that he's in negotiations and renegotiating his contract. I know he's free agent, whatever the fuck he is. And so they're $60 million apart. $60 million apart. They offered $120 million for so many years, and he said, how about 12 years? I think it was 10 years for 120. He says, how about 12 years for 180? And it's like, you got to fucking be kidding, right? You got to be fucking kidding. This so-called athlete, when he was 6 years old and dreaming about being a pro player, basketball, baseball, whatever the fuck he is, did he really stop and think, wow, someday I'm going to be knocking down $120 to $180 million? I doubt it. And the thing is that, again, it's an irresponsibility issue. Everybody wants to go and be deterministic about it and say, don't look at me. I have no free will. I am operating in a situation in which powers beyond my control are forcing me to do what I do. They're forcing me to go out and ask for more money. And the owners say I'm being forced to pay that money. And the fans say we're being forced to pay that money to the ever-increasing costs and whatnot to either the cable companies and or to the baseball clubs. And nobody wants to accept responsibility. If you want power, the key to do that is accept responsibility for something. And if you're in a position to accept that responsibility, you can't just go in to somebody's life and then accept responsibility for their life or parts of their life and expect to then be rewarded with power. It doesn't work that way. But anyways, like in this particular situation, the players, everybody in that should accept responsibility, and the fans need to start saying the reason that these prices are going up is because we stay willing to pay these prices. If it was up to me and I was the guy that ran baseball, I would simply say nobody gets paid more than $50,000. You want more than $50,000 a year? Go get a shoe contract, or go sell some uniforms in the club store or something like that. But other than that, everybody gets $50,000. Because asking the middle class, asking the people that make $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 a year to pay $20 for parking and then $100 for this and $50 for that, and so you take your family out, it's $200, $300. Or in the case of the Lakers, I've heard you go out with two people, it's $1,000 at the end of the night. And it's ridiculous. Did the Lakers lower the ticket prices when the Lakers were in the cellar for the better part of a decade? No. The prices for all the tickets and everything remained the same. That's crap. That is absolute crap. There should at very least be some kind of mechanism whereby if the team ends up in the cellar, the fans get a huge discount. Let's say if you're going to pay your players top dollar, they get into first place, fine. They come in second place next year, the fans get a 10% discount. The year if they come in third, 20%, fourth, 30%, etc., etc. So that you're getting some sort of a rebate. But this crap that you're going to pay all this money for a team that's not performing, and then you're going to have to keep paying it. And as a matter of fact, you're going to have to pay more and more to watch a team that's not performing year after year after year. Plus, you're paying $30 million to Mr. Dodger superstar pitcher. How is the game better because of him? How is the game any fundamentally better because of him than anybody else since the game's been played? Is this guy any better than, say, good old their southpaw back in the 60s? I forget his name now. But anyways, is he any better than him? Is he better than Don Sutton, Don Drysdale, people like that? Is he really any better? I don't see it. And this is a guy that's perpetually injured. This is a guy that doesn't seem to be able to win a game in the playoffs. In the playoffs and or in the World Series when it counts. He's great during the season, apparently, if he's healthy, if his back isn't giving him problems. But he's pulling down $30 million a year. And then how many of these athletes, baseball or otherwise, are taking the money that they're being given, they go to a strip club and they literally throw it away. Literally throw it away. You're throwing away my money. Well, it's something I can do about it, and that is I just don't bother with it. Professional sports are fine. I'll watch, I'll listen as long as I don't have to pay for it. If I'm going to go to a baseball game, I'm going after the 6th inning. That way I don't have to spend a nickel on these bums. People that stand around and sit around. They sit in the dugout and grab ass. And that's what I'm paying them $30 million a year for. They stand around out in the outfield, picking their nose, spitting, grabbing their crotch, looking around, and doing nothing. And I'm paying $30 million a year for this. You're out of your fucking mind. The rest of you that have season seats, you're fools. You're idiots, and you get exactly what you so richly deserve. Good and hard. And I hope you end up going broke. I hope you go bankrupt because you're a bunch of fools. No way you should be paying that kind of money for nothing. Baseball itself is the worst entertainment value in sports. Most of the time they do nothing. Stand around, sit around. The better ones are hockey and soccer, and football's even better than that. Yes, half the team is standing on the sideline, but at least the other half is doing something. So, I'm not going to, like I said, I'm not going to pay for it if I I can listen to it on the radio for free, that's fine. If I can go to the game for free, that's fine. But there's no way in the world that you're going to catch me paying for this crap. I'm listening to Hugh Hewitt, and they have a commercial on, and it's about adopting teens, and it's always a primer on how to speak teen. No. This is one of the huge differences between our culture when I was growing up, and a culture that I look around and see today. When I was growing up, for everybody, it was universal. You didn't go into home and start talking teen or talking preteen or talking slang. You didn't do it. Your parents wouldn't put up with it. Your parents would stop you and say, when you're in this house, you speak English. I'm not going to have to sit here and guess or wonder at what it is that you're talking about. Not going to happen. And they would, if you fussed about it, they'd say, our house, our rules. When you turn 18, you move away, you can have your own rules. Until then, our house, our rules. And that's what parenting is partly about. That's the difference between being a parent and being a friend. That was back in the days when these idiots on the left weren't questioning everything, including questioning parenting. Back in the 60s and 70s. 70s, you got books every day telling you how everything you know is wrong, everything you're doing is wrong. You don't know how to date, you don't know how to parent, you don't know how to go to work, you don't know how to get up in the morning without kicking yourself in the ass. And so you have all these helpful people, authors, that would straighten you out. The new book on how to date in the new paradigm, the book on how to be a parent, and it really was not about parenting at all. It was about being a friend to your child. No, wrong. If you hope to have a loving, respectful relationship with your child for any length of time, you will act like a parent. Thank you. So where does the rubber meet the road with determinism? Determinism is one of the big deals in our society. And it's a big deal because it allows people the luxury to fantasize that they're not responsible for anything, that they don't bear any responsibility. It's supposed to lend people sort of an impunity kind of situation where I can do whatever the hell I want without having to suffer consequences. And it's baloney. And as a reminder, determinism is the fiction, the contradiction that human beings have no free will, and that we are all forced to do what we do by powers beyond our control. Obvious bull, obvious crap. And this was something that came up with by a philosopher, a so-called philosopher, a so-called thinker named Hegel. A German guy. So, and he was influenced obviously by Descartes, who was the one that said, hey, take 2,000 years worth of intellectual history and throw it in the garbage. Hegel wouldn't have made the mistake of determinism if he'd actually studied Plato, Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas, etc., or et al. If he had studied those people, what they had to say, and what they discovered to be real, vital, and important, he would not have made the obvious mistake of determinism. But because he liked the idea, encouraged by Descartes, to just go ahead and throw all that out and start over again, he made errors he did not need to make. In any case, determinism. So where does the rubber meet the road with respect to determinism? And that is promises. Promises. It just occurred to me yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I've been thinking about determinism for years, and it just occurred to me how this is implemented, determinism, in our lives. As how do we get wrapped up in determinism? There's a saying And it always kind of, it bothered me. My conscience, that little bell was ringing whenever I'd hear it. And the saying was, under promise, over deliver. And it was appealing. It's a fallacy. A fallacy is anything that sounds right, but is in actuality wrong. So this is a fallacy to, and the way it lures you in is it really sounds kind of scammy. It does. It really sounds like a great scam. A way to get away with something. That's the appeal of that. Under promise, over deliver. Now, what is it that bothered me about it? It took me a while to figure that out because I'm not the brightest bulb in the box. But I finally figured out what it is that bothered me about that statement. And it was that if you take it to its logical extreme, what do you end up with? You end up with make no promises and claim credit for everything. Let me say that again. Make no promises and claim credit for everything. And so now we live in a society in which nobody makes promises anymore. Nobody's even asked to make a promise anymore. And certainly not our politicians. Now, I grew up in a society in which it was universal. Making and asking people to make promises was universal. The first place that the left got rid of the use of Nancy Pelosi et al., got rid of the use of promises, was the marriage vows. In the 1970s, people made up their own wedding vows. And what is a wedding vow if not a promise? Do you promise to have and to hold, to love and to cherish, as long as ye both shall live? It's a promise. I promise. And so when I was growing up, it was frequent. I mean, everybody, everywhere asked you to promise. Teachers asked you to promise. Parents asked you to promise. You got in trouble about something, your parents would look you in the eye. Sometimes if they had to, they would grab your head gently and, make sure that they got your focused attention. Do you promise that you won't do that again? Okay, I was a bad little boy sometimes, so I heard that perhaps more often than other kids. But every kid heard it. I saw it. Other parents did the same thing. Hey, do you promise? Another one was, do you promise to behave? Do you promise to behave? We'll go in the store. You won't have to sit in the car if you promise to behave. I don't hear that anymore. Nobody says that anymore. Nobody asks for promises. Politicians made promises. I promise that if you elect me, there'll be 2 chickens in every pot and 2 cars in every garage. I forget who promised that as a presidential candidate. I promise that I will lower the crime rate by 10%. But people made promises and they were held to them. Promise was a standard that you were held to. And now that it doesn't happen anymore. Nobody promises anything. Nobody's asked to. Do you promise? Okay, and so what ends up happening is nobody accepts responsibility for anything. Look, it's the sports loop of higher and higher and higher. Somebody just the other day got, they said, a contract for 10 years and $385 million or something. Are you out of your mind? You're going to pay an athlete $38 million a year? But nobody wants to stop that spiral, that downward spiral. We're paying people $385 million a year to stand around and grab their crotch, spit, scratch their ass. Okay, we're paying for nothing. We're not getting any value. The true conservative gets value. So, but it's all deterministic. Everybody blames somebody else. Don't ask me, says the fan. I have to pay whatever they charge at the gate. It's not up to me. It's up to this between the players and the owners. It's up to them. They're the ones that make the decision. The players say, don't ask me. My agent, my union, decide what it is that I should be asking, particularly my agent. I just leave it up to him. He goes ahead and does it. The owners say, well, don't ask me. It's the fans. The fans won't come to the game if we don't provide them with big shot players. And big shot players cost money. So nobody's accepting responsibility for what's going on, when in reality, everybody should be making those accepting responsibility and actually making promises to each other. You promise me if you're going to hire a player for X amount of dollars that he's going to be worth it. You know, if you're going to pay somebody $38 million a year, they better be somebody that is going to revolutionize the game. Every pitch is 100 miles an hour plus. So, that's in any case. The point I'm trying to get to here is that if you want to, what can you and I do about that? Make promises. Ask other people to make promises. When you're dealing with your children, ask them, do you promise? Whatever it is. Or do you promise to behave? Do you promise not to do that again? Make promises to your children. I promise I will be there for you. I promise that I will have answers for you. Make the promise and kill determinism once and for all. I've heard on the news recently that there's been a lot of talk on the news about irresponsibility and driving. A lot of people that are taking a lot of risks, usually 18 to 25-year-olds. I've experienced it myself, where I'm driving along, doing the speed limit. I look in my rearview mirror, and I've got somebody bearing down on me. They must be doing 60. And my heart just about jumps out of my chest because I'm absolutely sure they're going to hit me right in the rear. And then they swerve off, and they go around me, and they're weaving in and out of traffic at high speeds. And there's a particular place where people like to take those kinds of risks with motorcycles. I don't know if it was Mulholland, I think. But there's weaving, windy roads, and people see how fast that they can go, particularly on motorcycles. And that the neighborhood finally got the police out there to try and stop all this activity and doing donuts and things of that nature. And the police were issuing, I think they issued like 100 citations. And one person was cited for going 100 miles an hour, another for going 130. And all of these people are 18 to 25-year-old males. And whose fault at the end of the day is it for these 18, 25-year-old males beyond their own? I mean, they're adults and they have to accept responsibility for their own behavior. But who encourages this kind of behavior? And that is the governor. Governor Newsom, also known as GASM. Gavin Newsom, Governor Gasm, because he shut the state down. He didn't need to, wasn't necessary. He did it as a matter of power, not as a matter of science, not as a matter of dealing with COVID-19, the communist flu, for instance. He didn't have to do it, and more importantly, it doesn't have to remain that way. He makes his mistake. Admit that you made a mistake. Correct your mistake. Part of the problem that we now have in California is that we're not putting kids back in school because teachers won't go back to school. Any leader in his right mind, any governor's right mind would simply fire the teachers, withdraw his support of them sociopolitically, fire them if necessary, and rehire somebody else to go into the classroom and teach. But the Democrats are beholden to the unions, so they allow our children to be held hostage. So there's all kinds of consequences for locking down the state. We used to see this early last year in March. One of the most distinct features of the lockdown was the lack of traffic. Every day, I remember the first 3 days of the lockdown, I thought every day was Sunday. Because when I was going out and about making deliveries, there was no traffic. Every day was like Sunday. And then there were people that started taking advantage of that lack of traffic on the freeways. They were doing 130, 140, 150 miles an hour on the freeways. And who was it? Again, 18 to 25-year-old males with nothing to do. They're not going to school because the schools are shut down. They're not going to work because the place to work are all shut down. That's on Newsom. Newsom likes to be deterministic about things because he's a lefty. He's one of the politicians that subscribes to the theory that you under-promise and over-deliver. But the real question there is, how can you deliver anything if you haven't promised? How do you get credit for doing things you haven't promised to do? Now, and the logical extension or the logical extreme of that statement is promise nothing, take credit for everything. And that's what Gasm thinks he's going to do. He didn't make any promises before he became governor. He just made bland statements, bland, vague statements to give people the impression that he supported this, that, or the other thing. And now that he's in office, he thinks that he can simply ignore that which is negative or bad for his administration, for his career, for his reelection prospects, and simply emphasize all the things that went right during the course of his administration. But he can't, because the commensurability of authority and responsibility is metaphysical, and it cannot be ducked. You can't duck out of it. It is, Gavin Newsom shut the place down. He shut down the state. He has to accept responsibility for all the consequences and even the unforeseen consequences. So we have all these people out here racing around in their cars. Who's to blame? The individual, of course, because they're adults and they have to accept responsibility for their behavior. But in a larger sense, it is the governor. Governor Gasm bears the responsibility for all of the consequences that spring from the lack of education of our students, for instance. And so he bears responsibility. We wonder sometimes as conservatives, how is it that bums like Governor Gasm get reelected? Simple, we don't hold them accountable. We don't hold them accountable because they discourage accountability. Okay, so you have to remember, I still don't hear it. I hear people and I do it myself. I slip into the habit of blaming COVID-19. COVID-19 is not a sentient life form. It makes no decisions. It doesn't decide to do anything. Human beings make those decisions. Human beings in position of authority and power make those decisions. They decide how to respond or react to a pandemic. And they respond either correctly or they respond incorrectly. They respond either legally or they respond unconstitutionally. So it is important for us to keep our eye as conservatives on the ball. And every time we're talking about the lockdown, we must give whoever's the governor of the state that's locking down, whether it's Cuomo or Gasm, the blame or credit for that. This is the Gasm lockdown, not COVID-19. Again, I still hear people blaming COVID-19. Sorry, they didn't do a damn thing. Gasm did it. Or the mayor of Los Angeles has his own lockdowns. The county has its own lockdowns. It has its own. Ayn Rand said she called it Attila and the Witch Doctor. And it's a perfect example during this COVID-19 lockdown, Gasm lockdown, is that demonstration. Gasm is the Attila, and then he has his medical expert that becomes his witch doctor. And the county has a witch doctor. The federal government has the witch doctor. And the witch doctor for the federal government is, of course, Dr. Fauci. So Joe Biden is the Attila. Fauci is the witch doctor. And the witch doctor is the one. They need each other. They need each other. That's why Fauci's still there. Fauci's a bum. He's a lying bum. But he's still there because the left, the socialists in this country need people like Fauci. They need those witch doctors to give them credibility. So don't be fooled. Assign blame where it's due. Governor Gasm takes the gaff for shutting down the state. The shootings? Colorado, we had there was a shooting in Orange County. That is on Nancy Pelosi. It's on Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and every other Democrat in this country. If you're a Democrat, shame on you, because you're promoting socialism. You're promoting revolutionary thinking and attitudes. This is the reason that we have in this country, and have had since 1966, mass shootings, because these people are people that think that they are revolutionaries and that they are simply sweeping aside the people that are standing in the way of revolutionary progress. And we know that this is the aim of the left because they're explicit about it. There's leaflets that have been put out in Portland and Seattle and Milwaukee and New York to that effect, that Republicans and conservatives are standing in the way of socialist paradise and that they must be killed. They must be killed. And so that's what these folks are doing. They think that they are going to create paradise, and that the way to create paradise is simply, and that the only reason they're not experiencing paradise is because there's people standing in their way. And that if they can simply rid themselves of those barriers, then they will be able to experience paradise. So that falls again on the shoulders of the left in this country. Falls on the shoulders of Nancy Pelosi. And so I, as a conservative, demand that Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, every Democrat and Democrat so-called leader in this country, AOC, etc., I demand that they renounce socialism, renounce the cult of revolution, and renounce the cult of paradise. And I demand that they renounce this immediately, and that the sooner that they renounce all of that, the sooner we can be rid of mass shootings, mass killings, rid of people who think that they are revolutionaries. Isn't it true also that when Nancy Pelosi certainly believes this, and we know she does because she revealed that when she started blaming Donald Trump for the action of others on January 6th. Didn't she? Didn't she come out and say that it was Donald Trump? As a matter of fact, didn't they impeach President Trump over that, saying that he was the one that was the leader of a particular movement that tried to stage an insurrection? Yes, she did. So now the chickens have come home to roost yet again for Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, and the other so-called Democrats in the United States of America. I demand that they renounce and continue to renounce, not only them, but the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC. All of them must renounce socialism now. Renounce the cult of revolution and renounce the cult of paradise. And do it now. Well, that brings me to the end of another episode of The Drill. Be honest, be smart, be beautiful. Always remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win. I'm Ron, and that's The Drill.